a slight frown on his face. His day had been long, and all he wanted now was to grab a few essentials quickly and get back to his work. The store was small but well lit, filled with the scent of fresh bread and coffee. Moving swiftly down the aisles, he picked up a few bottles of water, some energy bars, a canned coffee, and a couple of other necessities. His movements were sharp, precise. He was used to high efficiency in everything, even something as mundane as shopping. When he reached the cashier, a middle-aged woman with short brown hair was finishing up with another customer. Impatiently, Musk tapped his fingers against the counter, his gaze fixed on the register screen as she bagged the previous customer's items. The moment it was his turn, he placed his items down and spoke in a firm, clipped tone. "Let's make this quick." The cashier, already moving as fast as she could, nodded and started scanning his items. Her hands moved swiftly, but Musk's eyes narrowed as he watched. "Faster," he said, his voice carrying a sharp edge. The woman swallowed, clearly flustered but determined to keep up. She swiped the items across the scanner, bagging them quickly, yet it still wasn't fast enough for him. "Come on," he muttered under his breath, shaking his head. "This is taking forever." The cashier's fingers trembled slightly as she pressed the buttons on the register, trying to keep up with his impatience. The beep of each scanned item echoed loudly in the quiet store, but to Musk, it felt unbearably slow. His frustration was growing, his jaw tightening with each passing second. Elon's patience snapped. His eyes darkened, and his voice cut through the store like a blade. "Are you serious right now? This is ridiculous." "You're moving like a damned snail." The cashier flinched, her hands shaking slightly as she fumbled with the register. She had dealt with difficult customers before, but this was different. The intensity in his voice, the sheer authority he carried, made her feel like a child being scolded. She swallowed hard, trying to maintain her composure. "Sir, I'm going as fast as I can," she said, her voice careful, controlled. "Please, just a few more seconds, no!" Elon's voice rose, sharp and commanding. "I don't have a few more seconds. Do you even understand who I am? I don't wait. I don't stand around wasting time while some incompetent cashier fumbles with a machine that should have been replaced a decade ago." The woman's face turned red, a mixture of embarrassment and frustration boiling inside her. "Sir, please forget it," Elon cut her off, his jaw tight with barely restrained anger. "You know what? Just give me the stuff. Don't even bother scanning it. I'm taking it. I don't have time for this nonsense." The cashier's eyes widened in shock. I can't do that," she stammered. "I'll get fired. Please, I don't care." Elon's voice thundered through the store. "I don't need to stand here while you struggle with a simple task. Just give me the damn bags, and we'll call it even." The cashier shook her head, panic creeping into her expression. "Sir, I really can't. The system tracks everything. If I let you walk out without paying, I'll lose my job." Elon exhaled sharply, exasperated. "Fine. If you won't do it, I will." Before she could react, he reached over the counter, grabbed the bags himself, and turned on his heel. "Problem solved," he muttered, heading straight for the exit. "Sir, please!" she called after him, but he didn't slow down. He walked out of the store, pushing the glass door open with a forceful shove. The cool night air hit his face as he stepped onto the sidewalk, his pulse still pounding with irritation. He didn't need this. He didn't need to waste his time arguing over something so insignificant. He had places to be, things to do. But behind him, the cashier was already reaching for her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed the police. Her heart was racing. She had never been in a situation like this before. It wasn't just a customer being rude, this was something else. This was theft. No matter how powerful he was, no matter how famous, he had just walked out without paying. And that meant she had to call it in. The phone rang twice before a dispatcher picked up. 911, what's your emergency? The woman took a deep breath, trying to steady her voice. A man just left my store with unpaid goods. He refused to let me scan them, grabbed them, and walked out. I think you should send someone. The dispatcher's tone was calm but firm. Do you know the suspect? The cashier hesitated for a split second. It was Elon Musk. There was a brief pause on the other end. The Elon Musk? The cashier closed her eyes, still trying to process what had just happened. Yes, she said. That Elon Musk. The dispatcher's voice remained professional. All right, officers are on their way. Are you safe? Yes, she said, though her hands were still shaking. I don't understand why he did it. Stay where you are. Officers will handle it. She nodded to herself, ending the call. Outside, Elon hadn't gone far. He was standing near the curb, his hands in his pockets, staring off into the distance. His frustration was still simmering, but as the seconds ticked by, he felt something else creeping in. A faint prickle of regret. Maybe he had overreacted. Maybe it wasn't that serious. But before he could dwell on it, the flashing red and blue lights cut through the night, and a police car pulled up to the store. 2 officers stepped out, scanning the area. One of them spotted Elon immediately, and exchanged a glance with his partner. They walked over to him, their postures relaxed but firm. Mr. Musk? One of them said. Elon turned his head slightly, his expression unreadable. Yeah? We need you to come with us inside for a moment. He exhaled slowly. Seriously? Seriously, the officer said, motioning toward the store. Let's go. With a tired sigh, Elon turned and followed them back inside. The cashier was still standing behind the counter, her face pale but resolute. The moment she saw him, her lips pressed into a thin line. That's him, she said. He took the bags and left without paying. The officer nodded. All right, Mr. Musk, care to explain? Elon ran a hand through his hair, frustration still lingering in his eyes. Explain what? The service was painfully slow. I don't have time for that. I took what I needed and left. The second officer sighed. That's not how this works. Oh, come on, Elon scoffed. Are we really doing this? It's a few groceries. Do you think I'm out here stealing because I can't afford it? The first officer shook his head. That's not the point. The point is, you walked out without paying. The cashier crossed her arms. I told him I couldn't let him take it. He didn't care. Elon glanced at her, his expression softening slightly. You were struggling with the register. Her eyes flashed. That doesn't give you the right to take whatever you want. A tense silence settled between them. Then, unexpectedly, the officers exchanged a glance and suddenly, they smiled. Elon frowned. What? The first officer chuckled. Relax, Mr. Musk. It's a prank. The cashier blinked. Wait. What? Elon narrowed his eyes. A prank? The second officer nodded. Yep. We were in on it. The cashier stared at them in disbelief. I don't understand. The first officer turned to her. Mr. Musk here wanted to surprise you. It was all set up beforehand. He wanted to see how you'd react, and well, you did great. The woman's mouth fell open slightly. So, this wasn't real? Elon smirked, finally letting the tension ease from his shoulders. Not entirely. But I did want to see how you'd handle it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a check, sliding it across the counter. Here. This should more than cover the groceries. And then some. The cashier hesitated before picking it up, her eyes widening as she saw the amount. It wasn't just enough to cover what he took. It was enough to make a real difference. I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep up the good work, Elon said with a grin. You handled that better than most would. The officers chuckled as they turned to leave, the tension completely diffused. Elon nodded at the cashier one last time before heading toward the exit. As he stepped outside, the night air felt different, lighter. Maybe, just maybe, he had made someone's day a little more interesting. The police officers exchanged glances before one of them shook his head. We're not returning the items. The cashier's mouth fell open slightly, her heart hammering against her ribs. What? But he took them without paying. That's theft, isn't it? She turned to Elon, her voice rising slightly with frustration and disbelief. You can't just walk in here, take whatever you want, and expect us to let it slide. Elon smirked, folding his arms across his chest. There was something unreadable in his eyes, something that made her stomach twist in uncertainty. I never expected you to let it slide, he said, his tone calm but firm. The first officer sighed, rubbing the back of his neck before turning to the cashier. Look, this isn't exactly what it seems. The woman's fingers curled into fists. What do you mean? The second officer glanced at Elon before letting out a small chuckle. It's a setup. Her brows knitted together in confusion. A setup? Elon finally moved, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a thick envelope, placing it on the counter in front of her. The cashier stared at it, hesitant. What is this? Open it, Elon said simply. Slowly, cautiously, she picked up the envelope and peeled it open, pulling out a stack of crisp bills. Her breath caught in her throat as she flipped through them, her fingers trembling slightly. This wasn't a refund. This was, her eyes darted up to him, searching his face for some kind of explanation. Why? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Elon shrugged. Because I wanted to see how you'd react. And because I know people like you don't get the appreciation they deserve. She shook her head, still struggling to process everything. You scared me, she admitted, her voice a little unsteady. I thought I was going to lose my job. I thought. She exhaled sharply, placing the envelope down, her mind racing. This is a lot of money. Consider it an investment, Elon said, leaning against the counter slightly. Your store needs some upgrades. Your register is slow, the lighting isn't great, and I'm guessing you don't get paid enough to deal with people like me on a daily basis. She gave a short, disbelieving laugh, shaking her head. You have no idea. I do, he said, his expression momentarily softening. And I wanted to change that. At least for you. The officers, who had been standing by quietly, finally spoke again. We were in on it, the first one admitted. Elon wanted to see how far you'd go to stick to your principles. You passed. Passed? She echoed, still trying to wrap her mind around everything. So this was all just some elaborate test? More or less, Elon said with a smirk. But hey, at least you didn't back down. She shook her head, still overwhelmed, but she couldn't ignore the warmth spreading in her chest. This wasn't just some rich guy throwing money around, there was something more to it. I don't know what to say, she admitted. Then don't say anything, Elon replied. Just keep being the kind of person who doesn't let anyone push them around. Even me. She let out a breath, a small, grateful smile tugging at the corners of her lips. That, she said, I can do. Elon nodded, satisfied. Then, without another word, He turned and walked toward the exit, the officers following behind him. As the doors swung shut behind them, the cashier looked down at the money again, still in disbelief. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something better. Weeks passed, and the memory of that strange, intense night lingered in the cashier's mind like a vivid dream. At first, she half expected it to be a one-time stunt, a fleeting moment in the chaotic whirlwind of working retail, but then something unexpected happened. Elon came back. Not once, not twice, but regularly. At first, she thought it was a coincidence. Maybe he just liked the convenience of the store being nearby, or maybe he had forgotten something from his last visit. But then she noticed the way he lingered, the way his sharp eyes scanned the shelves not with impatience but with quiet familiarity. He didn't rush her anymore. He didn't tap his fingers against the counter or demand faster service. Instead, he greeted her with a simple nod, sometimes a small, almost amused smile playing at the corner of his lips. "Still here?" he'd say, tossing a bottle of water and a protein bar onto the counter. "Still here," she'd reply, ringing up his items with practiced ease. The store began to change in small but significant ways. The ancient register was replaced with a sleek, modern system, one that didn't lag or freeze when processing transactions. The flickering overhead lights were swapped for bright, energy-efficient LEDs. New shelves appeared, stocked with a wider variety of products. The cashier wasn't sure how, but she knew Elon had something to do with it. One day, she worked up the courage to ask, "Why do you keep coming back here?" He tilted his head slightly, considering the question. "Good service," he said simply. She gave him a skeptical look. "You yelled at me last time," he smirked. "And yet you didn't back down." She rolled her eyes, but she couldn't help the small smile tugging at her lips. "Seriously," she pressed. "Why?" He leaned against the counter, his expression momentarily thoughtful. "Because I like seeing things improve," he admitted. "I like knowing I helped push something forward, even in a small way." She studied him for a moment, the weight of his words settling in. He wasn't just talking about the store. He was talking about everything, the way he lived, the way he built things, the way he looked at the world. Always moving forward. Always improving. Always pushing. She exhaled softly, nodding. "Well, thanks," she said, and for the first time, she meant it without hesitation. He nodded back. "See you next time." And with that, he walked out, the bell above the door chiming softly as he disappeared into the night. But she knew he'd be back. And for the first time since she started working there, she actually looked forward to her next shift.